I want to tell you a story. This is a story about following the rules.
Learn your rules, you better learn your rules. If you don't, you'll be eaten in your sleep.
This is a story about criminal misrepresentation. This is a story about how an industry like general contracting can be highly regulated but also be the absolute Wild West at the same time. But most of all, this is a story about how you get what you pay for. This video is actually a response to a video that Lamont Brothers has made about me a few months ago. I'll link it up here or maybe up here somewhere. But anyway, the point is that I wasn't thrilled with how I came off in that video. It was a little too victim-y. So what I'd like to do with this one is continue piling shame on the contractor who tried to scam me, but also I just really wanted to celebrate my victory over one of the most adversarial things that's ever happened to me in my whole life. So, let's get into it. In early 2022, my wife and I bought our home in Vancouver, Washington. It's an older home built in 1942. The basement was completely unfinished and only accessible through the garage. It was just a utility sink, laundry, and the gas furnace, electrical panel, and a makeshift plywood closet. Looking through the Zillow listings in my neighborhood, almost half of homes have finished basements in some form or another. Some are sketchier than others, and some are clearly not up to code. The ones that are not up to code are priced similar to homes with unfinished basements like mine. You can see the listing agent has to make a whole bunch of excuses and only hint at a livable space rather than claim it as real square footage. With ours, we were super excited about the possibility of what we could legally do with the space. The ceilings were the right height, and there was already electric and water down there. It was a blank slate. Joke's on us, though, because we had no clue what we were about to get into. About a year after buying our house, we had what we thought was enough capital to build out the basement as our master suite and master bathroom, so we began looking for a residential general contractor. I found a few, but they would never return my calls or they would come by and then completely ghost me. However, there was one that I reached out to that came highly recommended from a few people on Nextdoor. On February 13th, 2023, I submitted a website inquiry to a construction company that I am legally prohibited from naming. This company was just one guy who we will refer to as Brunt, because that's kind of similar to his name, and that's what my wife and I began calling him after seeing signs of his obvious incompetence. I did all the things I'm supposed to do when vetting a contractor. I searched his license in the Washington L&I database to make sure he had no claims, past or present. I read lots of Facebook, Google, and Yelp reviews. I looked for any other reviews or ratings I could find. All came back positive. My fatal flaw, though, was not asking for actual references from past clients that had had basement renovations done. On February 24th, Brunt emailed me an estimate for $82,641. I tell him we need to figure out how to pay for it. On March 6th, March 7th, March 24th, and March 27th, he emails me to follow up. On March 29th, he sends me a revised estimate for $77,000. On April 2nd, he offers to deduct another $4,000 from that estimate, and on April 4th, 2023, I finally accept. He says he can start work the next week, and I sign his contract. And we're told the whole thing should be wrapped up in 8 to 10 weeks. On April 12th, 2023, concrete cutting for the bathroom plumbing begins and the first round of framing starts to go up. So far, so good. Brunt's worker guys are super friendly. Brunt appears to be listening to what I want because he's asking me a million questions every day. We're even already picking out light fixtures and shower pans and such. On May 4th or so, Brunt begins working with JC Electric to wire up the basement circuits. As is standard protocol with any subcontractor for any job, large or small, JC Electric files for an electrical permit with the City of Vancouver. Put the biggest pin in this, though, because this is where it all went wrong for me. On May 8th, 2023, a city inspector comes to the house to meet with Brunt. He, by which I mean me, the homeowner, failed the inspection because the electrical permit was never attached to a proper residential building permit. In some cases, electrical permits can stand on their own, but this was not one of those cases, like at all. This was a full residential renovation, something that the city considers new construction, the same as if I was building a brand new structure on my land. It occurs to me that Brunt has no permits and never intended on getting any permits for my basement. On May 11th, 2023, Brunt emails me rescinding the $4,000 discount because now that the city will be involved in every little inspection, framing, insulation, drywall, electrical, plumbing, it is just going to slow everything down. I pay him more money, allegedly, for these permits. On June 26, 2023, I reach out to the city because this is taking far too long, and I catch him in his lie. The city says he submitted plans, but they didn't pass pre-screen standards. It was resubmitted and returned back for corrections. It's still pending with the applicant almost 2 months after he filed. I call him about this and he says he's working on it. It's just paperwork stuff, he says. Meanwhile, he hasn't done any work since early May, and I have an extremely steep and unsafe staircase. On August 9th, 2023, he sends the most damning email of them all. He says, "This is totally your call, but if it was my place, I would cancel permit and move forward with the project and bypass the stupid code." I respond saying that the project must be fully up to code. On September 9th, he says he wants to move the stairs back to the garage and will not answer any of my other questions about all the other code violations. I respond with my dissatisfaction and tell him that he hasn't taken any action on revising the plans since the city told him he needed to revise them 86 days prior. I give him until September 15th to set up a meeting with the city. On September 11th, he sends me a very aggressive email making some weird fat phobic comments regarding the egress window and tells me over and over again that I'm getting hung up on the codes. I respond saying the building code is not a suggestion, it is the law. On September 25th, we meet virtually with the city plans specialist. The city is sharing their screen, but Brunt can't see it because he calls into the meeting on his cell phone. I see Brunt's drawn plans for the first time on this meeting, and he drew them with a ballpoint pen. He didn't even label the length and height of each wall. He pretends he understands what the city's saying about resubmitting these plans that actually make sense, but it's clear he doesn't understand. So, finally, on October 2nd, 2023, I call him and tell him I'm firing him due to breach of contract, and I request a 75% refund of the $52,000 I had already paid him, just so I can settle this quickly and easily and respect the small bit of work that he did. On October 7th, 2023, he sends a certified letter back to me stating he does not do any unpermitted work for any customer. On October 27th, I again demanded 75% back and threatened legal action. On November 8th, 2023, he offers $10,000 back. I decline. I make a last and final offer of a $35,000 refund, and I again threaten legal action if he doesn't agree to this right away. Finally, on November 10th, 2023, his wife drops off a cashier's check for $35,000. As a condition of acceptance, I sign a document stating that I won't publicly disparage Brunt or his company, nor will I file any additional claims against his bond or take any legal action. I sign it, thrilled to be done with his stupid ass, and at this point, the basement project is officially paused, pending a full recalculation of costs and the hiring of a new general contractor. Sometime just before Christmas 2023, a truck pulls up in front of my house, and a friendly gentleman named Brian knocks on my door. Brian is with the Code Compliance Division, and he's here to inspect for any construction work that may not be up to code. Brunt had withdrawn or maybe just abandoned my building permit, and that made Brian suspicious. Of course, I let Brian inside and I told him this full story start to finish. Brian came back a few days later with some city goons and had some DSLR cameras and took about 200 photos of all the work that Brunt had done downstairs. A few days later, Brian calls. He states that I will be receiving a letter in the mail threatening fines of up to $500 per day due to non-compliance with building codes. However, he says he's not actually going to fine me unless I completely disobey his orders. He's willing to give me a few weeks, but Brian makes it very clear that I need to hire a new contractor and get the project finished like yesterday. He says, for example, if I have a fire and a city firefighter injured themselves on my janky ass staircase, the city could sue me for millions. Leaving it alone or even returning the basement to how it was is no longer an option, given that work had already started. Brian says that he'll be checking in weekly on my progress, and he absolutely does just that. So in March 2024, I put in an inquiry with Lamont Brothers, a design build firm based in Portland. Several meetings later, they took me on as a client. They got to work on a real set of plans and they started tearing out all of Brunt's work. There was very little that could be salvaged. Even the framing against the basement walls would need to be torn out because Brunt didn't install any insulation. There was no way the stairs were going to work out coming from my dining room. The stairs would have to go back to where they used to be, except now they would originate in the living room instead of the garage. The living room had a built in bookshelf where the new door would go, and the dining room door had to be patched with something. We essentially asked Lamont to relocate the built in from the living room to the dining room, and they did such a good job matching the archways in our home. During the permit approval process, we discovered many things. For new construction, which this apparently is, Washington law requires something called energy credits. In order to obtain those credits and therefore get permit approval, we had to throw a perfectly good gas furnace in the trash and replace it with a new Mitsubishi heat pump system. This was an unexpected extra cost, but I was mostly okay with this because July and August were starting to get pretty unbearable without air conditioning. Remember the electrical panel? That would have been in the bathroom of the new space, which is a big no no according to the city. Brunt made up some story about how he got a variance from the city on that. Turns out that was a lie, and we found ourselves tearing out the entire electrical panel, relocating it to the main level. Next, the window. The egress window was completely insufficient, and so we had to cut another window. The only place where that window could possibly go is right where our gas meter was. We were already tearing out our only gas appliance, so no problem, we thought. Nope, the whole gas line would need to be relocated to the side of the house and capped off there, all to make way for the new egress window. Lastly, the plumbing. The sewer connection is roughly 6 feet above the basement floor, so we needed the wastewater to defy gravity somehow. One of Brunt's plumbing buddies had put in some tiny macerator thing below the toilet, but that was comically undersized for all of the outflow from the shower, the sink, the toilet, and the washing machine. So that had to come out, and a massive pump and backwater valve was installed. Finally, in early August 2024, the permit was approved, and I had until the end of October to get the whole project done, but there was no way that was happening, so we got an extension until April of 2025. The inspection card was one of the most daunting things of all. There were 34 separate inspections to complete, some of which made absolutely no sense for my project. Shout out to Mark at the City of Vancouver, who came out to visit at least 10 separate times to sign off on all 34 of those inspections. I never heard from Brian again after I hired Lamont, so I hope he's doing well. In October of 2024, the heat pump and air handler were installed. In December, we relocated the electrical panel. In February, we got insulation. In March, we got drywall. In April, my incredible in laws arrived and helped me do painting, floor leveling, flooring itself, hanging doors, shower walls, tons of other things to prepare for that final. And on April 23rd, I had final electrical and plumbing work done. And on April 24th, I called Mark one last time. He approved the final building inspection over the phone because he had been there a few days prior and everything looked in tip top shape. And him and I had a really good thing going, so we were all right. And just like that, the saga was over, just a little over 2 years after it began. My permits expired the next day, April 25th. If I didn't make it, it would mean thousands of dollars in new permit fees, new plans, and all new inspections, and we didn't want to do that. So this is it. What you're seeing is mostly the final product. I'd say we're 99.2% of the way done. We still have some trim pieces to install, baseboards, closet doors, shower glass, things like that. But the permit is closed and the government is off my back. This project was such a lesson in patience and collaboration on so many other things. So I just want to give the biggest shout outs to some people. First, my beautiful wife, Chloe, for putting this stupid idea in my head in the first place and dealing with untold amounts of anxiety. Second, my wife's parents, Laura and Doug, for being incredibly supportive mentally and physically. Next is all the folks who helped me get this across the finish line and who I have so much respect for. So, if you're doing any kind of home project in Portland, Oregon, or Vancouver, Washington, you need to call these people. Corey Pena at Lamont Brothers, Zach Stewart at JC Electric, Matt Summerson of Summerson Plumbing, Scott at Area Heating, don't know his last name, Aaron at Home RX for insulation, Kellen at Bella Vista Drywall, and Ken at the Floor Store in Portland. I will link all of those below. Big shout outs to my colleagues, my friends, and my psychiatrist who has had to listen to me constantly talk about this project for the last 2 years. There's also a few people at Home Depot who were pretty helpful. Brunt, if you're watching this, you have absolutely no business being a contractor, and I hope someone sues you at some point because Lord knows I should have done that in May of 2023. You are a terrible human being and you should really be ashamed of yourself. Maybe just stick to demolition work because that's clearly all you did for me. As for me, I definitely succumbed to my construction inexperience, and in the end, it ended up costing a lot more than Brunt's original estimate, and I'll be working very hard for the rest of my life to pay for it. So there you have it. As Lamont said in their video, the lesson here is that permits really matter and that the building code is serious business. Look out for contractors who overpromise and underdeliver or think the building code is stupid, quote unquote. And in Vancouver, don't do unpermitted work because Brian and his goons will find you. Thank you for watching. I'm never doing another home project ever again.